This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today, I am honored to have Damien Filiatrault on the show. He is founder of Scalable Path. He's also got a software development and architecture background, which we're going to talk about a good bit today. And we're going to learn a little bit about some of the ways that we can hire staff, control, manage, report on, all that good stuff as far as development. And yeah, I did say control, and I said that for a reason, because we're going to talk a little bit about employee performance monitoring and such as well. Damien, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today, and what is it that you guys are doing at Scalable Path?
Okay, well, I'll give you the long version. I was working in the .com boom. Got a job as a sales rep selling online advertising for a couple of tech companies at CNET and Evite, and I got exposed a bit to technology there, but wasn't really involved until the whole bubble burst in 2000, and I went back and got a computer science degree, and then moved back into the city and got a job with a couple of digital agencies in San Francisco. And at the second one, called SolutionSet, I got the opportunity to go to India and manage a team of developers over there for 6 months and experience the challenges of the time zone differences and the culture, and came back to San Francisco, started working with some developers in Latin America, and it worked really well. And that's kind of where my starting my company kind of started, because I started working with people in Latin America, and at my current company, like I wasn't really seeing like a growth path there. So I had an interesting transition where I had some allies in the company, and I was working on some client projects for this agency, and was able to just sort of smoothly transition from being a full-time employee to being a contractor, and having some guys in Latin America that I was managing. And so from day one, just had a good client, and was making about the same amount of money as I was as an employee, actually a little bit more. And so it wasn't like a stressful, big, entrepreneurial leap. It was just sort of, hey, I'm now a contractor, and now I have a couple guys on my team. And then we just sort of grew organically from there, getting more clients and adding more developers. But there was kind of a shift in about 4 years in. I started that company in 2010, and then about 4 years in, I started seeing what TopTal was doing in, kind of focusing more on the individual developers and being more of a staff augmentation company, and as opposed to focusing on, more of a project-based engagement. And I had some experience at my previous company building online communities for Autodesk, and I just said, I can do this. I can build, extend our platform that we use to do this. So we built this platform that, where developers all over the world could create profiles and tell us all about themselves and their skills. And people started signing up, and um, that was really kind of the main shift, maybe 4 or 5 years in. And now we've been doing this, what's 2022 now, so close to 12 years. And
Hmm.
now we have something like 25,000 developers who have created profiles. And um, I'll cut myself off there. Yeah, that's a just to kind of a quick update of how I got where I am.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. So tell me a little bit about India. Like what was the culture? Was it like a culture shock when you got there? Was it, were you familiar with it? Did you research heading up to it? And what was that those 6 months like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't I thought I'd be in one of the major like tech hubs like Hyderabad or Bangalore or
Hmm.
Pune, or the bigger cities that are known for having a lot of tech workers. But I ended up in Goa, which um, is known in India as being like a vacation spot. And I didn't really know about Goa before I went there. It's on the west coast, about an hour flight south of Mumbai. But it really wasn't even part of India until like 1970. It was a Portuguese trading post, and so a lot of the people in Goa are mixed, between like Portuguese and Indian blood. A lot of the names are Portuguese. The architecture has there's a lot of Portuguese influence. There's some like 10,000 churches in this tiny,
Oh
or
wow.
I don't know. Don't quote me on that, number of churches, but a lot of Catholic churches. And so it's not your normal India experience, but it's still India now. And yeah, it was you know there's there's I could talk a lot about just stuff that doesn't have to do with technology, like the monsoon, and
Hmm.
the the infrastructure there, like a lack of a garbage collection system, and things that are the that are nothing to do with tech that are probably more interesting. But um you mentioned culture, and yeah, there is a different culture in India, and maybe I'm sure it is changing as the world kind of um, becomes more globalized, and of course you can't generalize to every individual, but I think it's fair to say that there is a you know overall some cultural differences, and one that I think that can affect how teams function is that in cultures like Indian culture, and I think you could say the same in other Asian cultures. There can be less of a desire in team members to kind of rock the boat, or
Hmm.
potentially you know be the bearer of bad news. They sometimes they're just won't proactively raise their hand and say, hey, there's a problem here that needs to be addressed. Um, and I think there was actually a study that sort of, not just some guy like me, relating experience. I think there was a study on air traffic controllers and the rate of accidents that
Yeah,
happen.
I actually read a book where they talked about that, where they were talking about
Yeah,
one of the crashes that went down because the guy would not tell his captain that that they were going to crash.
yeah, they do. Yeah, because they don't want to see seem like they're um, you know calling out an error to their senior manager, making them look bad, or something like that. So
Hmm.
there's a bit of that, and of course, I'd be up on my laptop in my apartment at 11 or 12 p.m., trying to communicate with my colleagues in San Francisco, and it wasn't really optimal. Um, so, um, yeah, I mean, those were some of the
Hmm.
technical challenges that when you contrast, um, with Latin America, where we focus a lot now because most of our clients are in the US, the rates are not as affordable. The cost of living is higher in Latin America than it is in India, but time zone is really great for collaborating with the United States, and culturally that region has been more influenced by, Western European culture that like us. And so there's what we call a little more cultural affinity and
Mhm.
in dealing with developers from that
Yeah.
region on the whole.
Yeah, I would imagine that would make communication a little bit easier, and you know, the culture. I know it's just one of the things when I've managed remote teams before, and I've had teams in India and teams in different places and in the Philippines and such, and sometimes there's some cultural differences that you don't realize, that when you say something a certain way, sometimes you're just, as a leader, you're offering a suggestion. You really don't want somebody just to go and run with it. You want them to kind of think about their own way of doing it, but sometimes that's seen as offensive. So therefore, they'll just take it and run with it because offering their own opinion may be offending me in some way. And that gets a little challenging sometimes. And as leaders, we need to learn how to relate to our folks, no matter what culture they're in, and it's challenging at times for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting way that same cultural issue could manifest itself,
Yeah.
in just running with something because someone told you an idea. Yeah.
Right. So what are some things that right now we're in a situation where some companies are doing a hiring freeze, yet they still have a lot of work, and there's other companies such as where I work, where we've lost some people due to remote work or whatever reasons. The Great Resignations are saying we're looking to hire people. What are challenges are you seeing from tech leaders today in both of those realms, and how can we kind of work through them?
Well, there's one obvious thing is that, um, rates are going up. The cost of hiring developers has risen, I think, greater than most other areas, other kind of jobs. And some of the reasons I think that's happening are, you know, during COVID, while other industries might have slowed down, tech kind of thrived. In fact, it enabled us to, continue doing a lot of the things we do. So that there was a lot of venture funding
Mhm.
going on. So kind of a thriving industry with a lot of investment. And at the same time, um, everyone, you know, I think you even said this to me right while we were chatting before, like everyone went remote. Before when I would talk to certain companies, and say like, hey, Scalable Path is a company that provides vetted remote software developers. They're like, well, we want someone to be in our office. And we said, well, we're
Right.
probably not the right fit for you. But after COVID, like everyone was doing remote. And so I think when people said, okay, now we're letting our people work remote in our local area, well, so why can't we like work with people that are farther away? Or why can't we work with people in other countries? And so a lot of developers who might have been in other countries saw a lot more companies that were interested in working with them after COVID. And so what I saw from developers in Latin America was that their rates really jumped up. And I think it was just kind of market forces, demand, more companies open to working with them and competing for their, you know, competing for those people. And plus you had inflation going on at the same time. So um, that's a trend, that's a challenge, right? The costs are going up. Another challenge is just getting people, interested in your company. And of course, like what we've been talking about is money, but that's only one motivator. There's other motivators um, that maybe hadn't been such a big deal in the past to people, but I think younger people these days are, and I'm happy this is happening, but like people want to work on meaningful things. People want to work
Mhm.
on things that make them feel like they're contributing positively to the world, so like if your company has aspects like that, I think kind of putting that out there and highlighting that, how your job might give meaning to it, to a employee, like whether you're doing beneficial to help people in some way or help the planet in some
Mhm.
way. Really kind of, bringing that to the forefront in your job description can be helpful. Additionally, what was my other? Uh, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
we are.
people, developers really want to work on cutting edge
Yes.
technologies, right? Like they'll take a cheaper job, just if it's working on a good tech stack because they want to grow in their career and they want to kind of future proof their skill set. So, sometimes that's a detriment if you're like, yeah, we've got this legacy app that, is in this technology that's kind of a dead end. Like
Hmm.
it's kind of another reason to upgrade your tech stack is
Yeah.
that you can attract good people who want to work in it. So
Yeah, I think
those
that
are a
goes back
couple
to
of
like
things
what
that come to mind.
Simon Sinek talked about. What you want purpose. You want to have something that's bigger than what you are. What you are as a whole. You want to
Yeah.
work for something that's larger than yourself. And then I can't agree with you more about the upgraded tech stack. The last thing developers want to do is get a job where they have to go back and learn COBOL or something, right? You want to be using whatever the latest frameworks are and tools, and you want something that's SaaS based. You don't want to go back to legacy apps or anything like that. So yes, it's definitely one of those things that there's more benefit to upgrading your tech stack than just having something that may be more efficient and cost effective. It's also that talent acquisition as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things that when it comes to hiring remote employees that aren't full time, let's say they're contractors or supplemented for a project, or maybe they're a long term contractor that you want to bring on for a period of time. Um, do businesses approach that differently than they would like a full time remote employee that's not a contractor? Like, or are you seeing it kind of the same thing? Like, what's the operational path of something like that? Is it we ship you a computer, you connect to our network some way, you code remotely, and just we share a GitHub with you, or how do you see that path usually playing out?
Well, I think different kinds of companies are really different.
Hmm.
Like if you're a startup, I think you're going to handle that a lot differently than if you're like a Fortune 500 company,
Right.
right? Like if you're a big enterprise company, you may deal with like sort of the one path you said where like, yeah, we're going to ship you a laptop or something, but that's
Hmm.
that's not what I'm normally seeing. Like
Yeah.
I think you know developers usually have really good laptop already. They have their whole development environment. They're for us, they're pretty much using their own computers. And so that's just to mention, to answer your question about hardware, but other part of your question was about, do they how do they approach it in general? I think there's been an evolution in how people think about it. Like when outsourcing sort of first came out, I don't know, in the 80s or 90s, um, it was very different. It was India was kind of what came to mind, and you would it was very different from your internal team. Like you'd have your full-time employees and they were
Hmm.
doing stuff, and then you'd be like, okay, let's outsource this project, and then you'd have this team, you know, do a project, and then you'd like deliver requirements, and then they would deliver code, and it was like sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Probably didn't work a lot of the time. And it was completely separate and completely different, and a huge line between internal and outsourced people. And then I think what people are doing now, and COVID has accelerated this, is like, you know, I don't think people should, and the companies that I'm seeing succeeding with this, like, draw big distinctions, right? It's like everyone is a member of a team,
Yes.
and let's say a lot of people are doing agile, and you've got, whether you have a big company, even if you've got a large company with 100 developers, it's probably best if you break that down into like squads of a
Hmm.
manageable size that can focus on certain things, and maybe 10 or less. And you've got a squad, and there might be a few people who are in your local area, or that are from another chapter, a previous chapter in the company, and or maybe they're still in the office, right? But and then if you start considering augmenting that team with someone from, say, another country, like, you want them to feel like just like everyone else.
Right. You want
You
them
want,
participating in stand up. You want them exactly like every other team
yeah,
member. You don't want, I've seen some companies where I was working with a company, we were going through an acquisition, and in their email signature, they would have in parentheses beside the person's name, like if they were a contractor or something separate, which it was really off-putting, like I'm working with this group,
yeah.
and then I'd get an email from someone and it'd be like their name parentheses contractor. Like, do I need to know that in the email? Like, why are we
I don't
calling it out?
know. Yeah,
You
I don't
know?
know, but it's definitely not something. I mean, we're mostly contractors, so
Right.
it's like, and I've worked with some people for, I don't know, 8, 10 years, and there might be a contractor, and what matters is that relationship, and do they, you know, we invite contractors, to our, quarterly meetings, and we kind of, you want to motivate them just like you would, a full-time direct employee. You might do a team building exercise with them. You want them, one key point is like, you don't want to have um, them feeling like second class citizens,
Exactly. Yeah.
either emotionally or literally, like where there's some sort of access or tooling that some subset of your team has that you know the contractor doesn't have
Mhm.
access to, like, if you're using project management software like Jira or Trello, everybody, even if you're in the office, you're using that collaboration software, and it's leveling the playing field, right? um, if you have a meeting, you don't want to have everybody that's in the office, like, right, like in a conference room, and have like a crappy mic, or like, have them able to see some presentation better than anyone else. Like, I would say, make everyone's got to feel the same, like they're not missing anything by being remote. And uh yeah,
So
there's
let's
just a
talk a little
couple
bit about that, because
examples. Yeah.
that's a tough thing to do. And I've noticed, like during COVID, sometimes, especially if you have a hybrid environment, it gets really tough to make sure that the remote folks are included sometimes. And because sometimes you just you're walking down the hallway and you have this like serendipitous conversation with someone, and something comes up, or maybe people decide to go out and grab lunch, and there's that couple of remote people that don't get included, or you want to bring donuts into the office. It's really difficult sometimes to make sure that everyone is fully included when you have a hybrid team. What are some things that you've seen that help managers include everyone?
Well, I don't know that I have like any, kernels of wisdom for you there. Like,
Yeah, no
I
silver bullets to help me out.
no, like I, my team's like 100% remote, so I
Mhm.
don't have to
You don't have
do,
that challenge, I
I
guess.
don't have
Yeah.
that challenge, but I think some things are probably on, you may strive for a certain goal, and you may never, you know, achieve like the most perfect level playing field. But
Mhm.
like, I think you should take any successes that you can and not leave anything like, yeah, you may not the remote person, if you do have an office, is not going to get that ad hoc conversation, right? Or the lunch.
Hmm.
But make sure that when you do have a meeting, or maybe, try to put it in an email or a Slack, to, if you had a good conversation with someone, at least like say, hey, we me and Dave bumped into each other and we just talked about this, and put that in
Mm,
Slack so like
yeah.
people could at least know it happened. I had
And could
a
share and add on to it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I talked to a guy recently and he's like, yeah, I was working, he was a recruiter and he was like, I was working for this company and they had mics everywhere in the office so
Huh.
that like you could, if a conversation happened, it would be recorded and you could share it with anyone. I was like,
That's a little creepy.
really? That's pretty creepy. But that was like that company's approach to that. I don't support that, by the way. But it just came to mind, kind of a funny thing. But
No, that's interesting. Yeah, and everybody's trying something new. I've seen all kinds of, strange and different things. Like I've seen some teams that are hybrid when they would normally like get together for meetings, they make sure everybody does it remotely. Like everybody, we're not going to get into an office and have some people Zoom in, some people in person. We're going to make everybody Zoom in, and we're
yeah,
not going to
that's
do
what I
this
would do. I would say
blended
just zoom
effect.
in from your desk,
Yeah,
and
and
then
just make
if
it that way
and
everybody's equal.
yes.
Yeah.
And
So
to be
I
honest,
think
it's
there's
it's kind of, I can hear better and see the presentation better on my own screen,
oh
honestly.
yeah,
Like
me too. I
that than
agree
I can
100%.
in a conference room.
Yeah, I don't. I like. I've gotten to the point where I feel like, unless you're trying to do like a really brainstorming session or something,
Hmm.
most meetings are better remote just because you have your own screen that's right in your face. You're not like trying to look at a projector that's half faded on the corner. Uh,
Totally.
and yeah, so I agree with you 100% on that for sure. Um, one question that we talked a little bit about before the recording that I wanted to hit on a little bit is monitoring employees and ensuring people are getting good work done. And in the office, one thing is you walk by and you see people sitting at their desks, you assume they're working. And then remotely, you don't have that. So I've seen some leaders and managers that want to overextend sometimes and get too deep into the fact that they want to track what everybody's doing in certain ways. And I've seen other managers that just want to say, "Hey, are you getting your job done? If so, then I don't really care." What have you seen in the industry, and what is the way that we can kind of, as leaders, successfully navigate that realm of monitoring and making sure that our team is doing the work that they need to be doing?
Yeah. This is a topic that's coming up more and more, because of the transition to remote. And, I think you got to strike the right balance. And,
Mm,
you know, on the one hand, um, you know, monitoring performance you know, as a manager is important, and you shouldn't give up on that. Um, I don't think KPIs are going away, like metrics, not metrics are healthy for a business. And,
mhm.
um, one thing we follow at Scalable Path is the have you heard of EOS, like the entrepreneurial operating system? It,
No,
it,
let's talk about that.
it, it's just a set of best practices that are brought up in this book called Traction by Gino Wickman.
Hmm.
And like the book is not like, there's nothing in that book that's like earth-shatteringly new, or it's just kind of a um accumulation of best practices that are agreed on across the world of like business management, and sort of stuff that, if you're a developer and you come from like the background like us, and you're like, I became a manager because I was just coding for a long time, right? And so
Hmm.
you didn't go to business school, so it's kind of a good thing to like just read. There's a lot of other good books. I think there's one by the ex CEO of Intel, like Andy Groves or something, like about his management style. And it's also very much about performance metrics. And my point in bringing this up was that, yeah, you do need to have a healthy business, or you don't need it, but it really can help, is to know, how each team is performing, and to choose like what are their metrics that matter. If you have a sales rep, it might be, how many deals did you close this month?
Mm-hmm.
And you could do it for the team, like what are the numbers that really encapsulate what that team or individual is accomplishing, right? And that will move the direction in a positive way, and then communicate that to people, like, this is what matters, and this is how you're going to be evaluated, and so this is what you should try to optimize. Like, it's really clear. People want to know, like, what are you looking for me to do? And there's certain roles that I think that's easier for, like a sales rep, or if you're working in a factory, it's like, well, how many widgets did you make? Like, kind of obvious. But then when you get into some other roles, it can be a little bit weirder, like marketing. Like marketing, you could be like, yeah, number of leads that came in, right? Or number of users on a website or in an application, right? With a developer, it gets even weirder, right? And I think that what I've seen is that you can still keep those like high level broad goals, like trying to, like, we use GitHub issues with a layer on top of like this app called Zoob, which is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like makes GitHub issues more agile, right? Like more like scrummy,
Yeah.
right? or
Okay.
or kanban-y. And but like GitHub, it's really unfortunate that GitHub's like commit logs are really bad. Like I don't know what's wrong with them. You can't like get commits, like their data is just wrong. But like there's some metrics that you can pull on developers that are totally fair, I think. Others that are sort of a gray area, and others that are like don'ts, right? Like, so for me, the best metric I can come up with, and I can't say that I've successfully been able to like implement this and track this yet, but it's my goal, is to like maybe story points completed last month,
Oh,
right?
so like the velocity of an individual user.
Yes, yeah, like an individual person. Like, okay, and to make that work, you need some like tooling, like, or some processes, like, hey, we have to accurately, put the right number of fair number of points on each like issue that you're working
Right.
on, or each
Then you'd have to
feature.
divide that by each team, because each team will have a different velocity. So it'd be like the number of points completed by an individual divided by the team's velocity. So you have like a balance between different teams, because some teams rate things really high, some are low. You have different velocities among that team,
Well, I'm just
among
talking
different
story
teams.
points. I think you could have a like a
Yeah, but
like
I've had development teams where like one team is averaging a velocity of like 30 story points every sprint, and another team's averaging like 60, just because they rate things higher. Yeah,
well, they
as a
should
team.
then, but then you should just get them all. I think you should get them all rating it the same. You need to have a scale, and it should, and you. So I think that's possible to get
Mm-hmm.
more of a common definition of what is a 3 point issue versus what's a 5 point issue, or
Yeah,
or
I get
what's.
that. It's kind of hard to do when you got different technologies, though. Sometimes,
Okay, true. And you could
like if you have like
and
a
all
COBOL
of it,
team or a back end team and a front end team, it can be a little bit challenging.
right. But like
But
and what you said is true. It's like kind of a later point. Like, all of these individual metrics shouldn't be like, you know, obsessed on or used. Any individual metric, I don't think, should be used to evaluate someone. It's all in the greater context, right?
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
so, you might, but I think it's fair to look at like, or to want, a person on your team, a developer on your team, to be productive over the course of a month. That's what you're looking for. You're not, that's fair as a business. I don't think that's creepy or big brother like, to be wanting that and to measure some things to try to get a sense, okay, how much quality work is this person getting done, right? And so, but there's other metrics on the other side of the spectrum that are just not really into, which, like we had a client who was like, yes, we want you to use Hub Staff Tracker. We want this developer to use this. And granted, when we dug in a little more into the policy, they just wanted him to do it for like a month or two, which was okay, made it a little bit better. But the software is like tracking your keyboard activity and tracking your mouse activity and taking screenshots of your screen. And I'm not suggesting that. I think that's micromanaging.
I agree. That gets kind of creepy too, and then it just results in employees installing tools to like jiggle their mouse, so it looks like they're constantly on their computer.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think you should monitor that, but if there was some company that decided that they were going to do that, I mean, I think that some of these like micrometrics should only be used as like to catch like red flags, like, okay, like this person had like astonishingly low activity, like, okay, there's something going on here, like they're just like not working, like just catch like the edge cases of people totally abusing the system. But like,
I think responsiveness is one thing that I would like to see, monitored as well. Like I totally get with the story points, and I think that's fantastic, especially for developers, but also like responsiveness. Like if we do have set hours, like, hey, as a team, just because of collaboration and us, slacking back and forth, we want everybody working between 9 and 5 or something like that. And then they don't respond to a Slack messages for like 2 hours, but it's not during lunch. It's like right in the middle of the morning and haven't told anybody they have an appointment or something like that. I think it gets a little sketchy if it's a repeated function. I don't know how you would track that
and
per se, but
I don't know how to track that. And I would generally agree. Like, but it would have to be like,
but it's got to be a repetitive thing, not
value.
like once or twice, because every now and then you get caught up in your work, the messages are going off and you're just not paying attention because you're in the zone and you're coding and you're going to get through this. You're going to figure out this problem before you respond to anybody, So I've been there too. So I get it.
Or even just, a lot of these things will even out over a month, like you might be like, yeah, I had to run an errand, and it was this day and then that was okay, but if that happened most days, that's a problem, and so I'm with you on that. I really do value responsiveness, and it usually correlates oddly with other performance metrics. Like it's kind of like a canary in the coal mine too. It's like when someone's responsive, like they're usually on it,
they're usually taking care of the other problems.
The reason you're stressing out that they're not responsive is because maybe there's another issue.
Right.
That you're like,
frankly,
what's going on?
Yeah, if they're writing good code, they're getting all their user stories done, they're in all the meetings on time, then you don't have a need to like ping them to see if they're going to be responsive or not.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all part of the bigger picture. There's some gray area metrics like, number of commits, like lines of code written. Like, I think not like super valuable. Like you shouldn't be like grading them on that, but like it could
sometimes you would prefer more
flags.
Efficient, like less lines of code, have more efficient software sometimes.
But at the end of the month, if you're like, okay, like you committed, like you didn't commit at all last week.
Oh
like,
yeah, that's a big deal.
What's going on? But like I think it's fair to look at that as to catch like edge cases that are problematic, like what's going on here. So that's kind of my current thinking on it.
I 100% agree with that. And I think that's, I really like the idea of the almost like a personal velocity to track. And also it kind of shows you when someone loses engagement. Maybe something's going on with their life that they're just not talking about, and all of a sudden they drop off for, an extended period of time. It's one of those things like, hey, how can we help you get back on track? What's going on here? Is there something that we can do do we not explain things well? Or did we give you a problem that's not in your wheelhouse? Like what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think with that, you definitely gotta, I think the trick with that metric, and I haven't gotten it going yet, will be, it requires upfront do like diligence by the team to like make sure that those points are accurate, or
mhm.
else the answer is always going to be, oh, well, that should have been a bigger point,
Yeah.
like, so, well, if it should have been, there needs to be a process where you're like, okay, this issue, which often happens, I'm totally that something that you thought was a 3 becomes a 10. Like it happens all the time, and but as long as there's a process where they say, hey, this is now a 10. I think this should be a 10. And like someone like the manager or like Scrum Master says, yep, it's a 10, and then it doesn't have to be time consuming, but people need to do that, I think, in order to get their numbers reasonably accurate.
Mhm. No, I think you're right. I think accountability is an important thing too. Is and also that comes into, sometimes leaders have trouble holding people accountable, and I don't know if it's because of fear of losing someone, or fear of having that. You don't want that stigma of being a micromanager, so you don't hold people accountable, and things just drift and drift and drift and get further and further away from where the employee should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So what are some other like unique things that you've seen maybe post COVID that has led people more towards the side of looking for remote contractors, and have you seen that growth? I imagine you have, but I'm just curious. Have you seen like an uptick in that arena?
Yeah. I think, as I said, like there's more companies open to it now because of COVID pushing everything remote. And also, I think there's just a general um, challenge in hiring in tech. Like there's just more demand than there is supply, and so I think we have seen a general uptick in companies that are open to this model.
Hmm.
But it's like a double-edged sword. I'll say it's an overall net positive for a company like mine, but what that means is that you have more clients, more potential clients, right? Because it's harder to hire. And then you, as well as the staffing company, are having the same challenges, right? So you have more demand, but then you have to also compete, and you also have to build your team. And so, it's not all a win.
Yeah,
You're in the same environment. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I totally get that. Um, so how can people connect with you online and learn more about the things that you guys are working on?
Well, on our website, basically, I would just say, if you're a software developer or a designer or project manager, data scientist, that sort of thing, come to scalablepath.com and check us out, and perhaps create a profile. It's pretty quick, and it's a way for you to see what kind of opportunities are out there in remote development jobs. And likewise, if you're a company that's looking to hire these kind of people, you can come to our website and click on the Hire Now button and tell us all about, your project or the type of person you're looking for, and we can help to connect you with them.
Awesome. I think that sounds really cool. And I think, I know today we've had, trouble sometimes when it comes to getting the right person in, and, using a service like Scalable Now is really important when you have that kind of urgent need to get some people in there coding something new. So I think that's really cool what you're doing.
Thanks.
All right. I think it's been a good conversation, and I'll link all that stuff up in the show notes so people can find that at geekleader.com as well. And Damien, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.